According to Yahoo Finance, Americans are delaying retirement and 64% of them will retire broke. Crazy. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Make Your Money Matter. This is the show dedicated to helping you create a better relationship with your money. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. Look, the challenge today is no longer the access to information. I think we all can agree with that. But rather, it's finding the right information. And more importantly, how all of that information and the universe of information that we have at our fingertip, how that all applies to you. And that's my commitment to you here each and every week, because after all, your money matters. Guess what? It's NFL season. It's back, baby. Now, last week we just had our Rams here in LA take on the Bills on last Thursday, and week one is in the books. And I don't know about you, but I love football. Now, I'm more of a college football guy myself, but I do love watching a good game on Sundays. And it also marks, the ending of summer in a way for many of us heading into the fall. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think we all can agree with this. It's not felt like fall out here in California with this heat wave we've been having. But because it is football season, I want to talk about someone we've all come to know and love in the football arena on the Make Your Money Matter show today. What Rob Gronkowski, the Gronk, can teach us is amazing when it comes to money. And I'll understand why, especially about saving for retirement. But before we kick off this episode, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. We all know big spenders live for now. That might be you, but just in general, big spenders live for now, but their future-oriented counterparts, like Gronk, who would rather skip flashy spending in favor of what he deems a simple life and an early retirement, as we recently saw for those NFL fans out there who he retired, obviously came back to the Buccaneers, but is retired at a relatively early age for an athlete. Now, here's what I want you to know about Rob Gronkowski. First off, he became famous in January 2019 for more than his football prowess. He was retiring at that point after 9 seasons, and get this, without ever having touched his NFL salary. Many people don't know that. And I want to reiterate that he's retiring after 9 seasons. He came back, but he retired then after 9 seasons without touching his NFL pay. Imagine that for a second. He had made his way through his career living only on his endorsement money. Now, for Rob Gronkowski, this helped him save over $50 million. Now, quick aside, understandably, myself included, few of us will have the ability to save that amount. However, I think it's fun for us to explore what we can learn from him about the, as I say often, the often too taboo subject of money and savings, because that's what we're all about here at One Capital Management. And on the Make Your Money Matter show, we love talking about this. And the first thing I want to bring up is living within your means and save for retirement. Oh yeah, Brad, I haven't heard that before, but it's important. According to Yahoo Finance, Americans are delaying retirement and 64% of them will retire broke. Crazy. Now, it's predicted that another 19% will retire with less than $10,000. Friends, as a financial advisor for nearly 20 years, this is why I do this show. This is the kind of stats that I read every week that makes me so sad, because I know we can help ourselves with the right knowledge and the right stewardship that I want to provide for our clients here at One Capital Management and for you watching and listening here on the Make Your Money Matter show. So that 19% of people who will retire with less than $10,000, my heart bleeds for them, because I want them to hear this show, to hear an advisor who actually cares, to make sure they don't become a statistic in that environment. Now, this all paints a grim picture for retirement, right? Now, if you're not careful, that can be you. So saving for your golden years is about ensuring you don't retire without the gold, right? Can't be called your golden years if you haven't saved the gold. Now, if you're going to save for your golden years, you want to save to have the gold to do that. You want to have to start with the basics. You want to live within your means. Well, Brad, I was raising a family. I mean, inflation is going rampant right now. I was trying to put my kids through school or pay down on a mortgage. Fully aware, life, especially in many states like here in California, is expensive. For those listening here and again, watching here, for our neighbors here in California, we get it. It's expensive to live. It's expensive to raise a family. It's expensive to feed ourselves and be healthy about feeding ourselves. As we all know, nowadays, this organic this and this non-processed that, it's expensive. but understanding your budget and really focusing on what my wife Veronica always says, taking care of your tomorrow self, which is basically living within your means today and saving for retirement. Now, quick stop for a second. As I always say each week, the word retirement needs to be defined. And I think it's important for us to define the word retirement. Being financially free, not dependent on an income source, whether that's at 40 or 60 or 70, that's not the point right now. The point is being financially free, because Rob Gronkowski, as a great example, retired relatively young in his mid 30s. So you got to think about this in a concept of age is not always the marker of retirement. Now, do yourself a benefit, not just for yourself today, but for your tomorrow self, and do that first and very most important step. Now, for Rob Gronkowski, his means were equivalent to the income generated from endorsement deals and not on his unguaranteed NFL salary. I said that importantly here because the salary he received from the NFL, his NFL contracts, like many of the athletes in the NFL, are not guaranteed. And Gronkowski realized something that I think is really powerful. And that's why I want to focus on him today, not just the fact that it's the mark of the football season. He realized that living within your means is not about the digits on your paycheck, because his were large. Instead, it is more important to pay more attention to your net income. The lesson for all of us here that I want to take away on this first step is that you should prioritize saving before spending. I know that's not an aha moment, but it's important so that saving money to you becomes a habitual part of how you manage your finances. Now, what I also love about Gronk was he had a lot of advice to young people. Now, I want to share that with everyone listening today and everyone watching today, because I think it really go across any age spectrum. I mean, financially, Gronkowski lives by a core principle: keep it simple. And we've all heard that before, right? The KISS analogy, keep it simple, stupid. But this for him means he buys only what he needs to be comfortable and not more. But being quote unquote simple, look, it's not appealing to most people. Sit and think about that for a second. It's okay to be honest with yourself. I know I was when I was going through this and writing this week's episode and looking at the Kiplinger article that I was basing some of the data on, because being simple is really not that appealing to a lot of us. It's okay, but it's important to make sure that you find what you need and you save for what you want. Now, simplicity directly goes against, I think, the flashy, high fashion, materialistic influencers that many people aspire to be like. However, life as we know it is much more than that. It's less about the status symbols and materialism, and it is more about keeping it simple, and it pays off when it comes to saving and investing your money. If you are truly going to go through your budget, and let's just talk about that for a second. In terms of the first thing I want to touch on today about living within your means, if you were to truly go through your budget and honestly tell yourself how much of that you spent were wants because of what you were marketed to or what I think you need, but it's really more of a want versus what is actually there to make you comfortable, to feed yourself, to put a roof over your head, and to do the basic items that you need each day, each week, and each month, because that matters. And again, it pays off when it comes to saving money. So for Gronkowski, being fashionable means wearing the same pair of shoes or clothing items until they're worn out. Sometimes he reported he wore the same pair of jeans for a whole week. This is from him washing them around on the third day maybe. I mean, this guy's worth like $50 million, you know? So you got to think about this. So this goes across the spectrum of wealth. And the lesson here is not to turn against buying necessities. I want to be very clear, but to change our definition of what a necessity is. A necessity is something you cannot live without. Scrolling through online websites, shopping, filling up wish lists, and adding endless items to your cart are all wants. Let's be clear. And they often, let's be honest, they get confused with needs or necessities. This, my friends, is a slippery slope that encourages the accumulation of credit card debt. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in 20 years as an advisor, and in fact, right now I have 3 or 4 active clients right now that we're doing debt management with. We're doing what's called snowballs or avalanche. And if you haven't heard about that before or those terms, it's something that we're able to do and design for each one of our clients to help snowball, or what I call avalanche, their debt down as quickly as possible, saving them money and time and stress, while also being able to shift what was once going out to a liability over to going to an asset. Now, keep it simple principle is about spending money wisely. I think that's key. Not frivolously, not frugally, wisely. Avoiding unnecessary purchases leaves you with money to put into long-term financial goals. You can retire sooner or become financially free sooner rather than later if you adopt a savings culture that supports your retirement goals and ultimately makes it habitual for you, for yourself. And you want to have something you can repeat. Don't make it hard on yourself. Start early, start often, but it does make a difference. Now, here's what I want to say about bringing up Gronk and the start of the football season. And you're probably thinking, why should I apply KISS advice to my finances? So it's really important to understand that the simplicity of this from a guy who's been in the news, obviously on ESPN, constantly very successful, who's won Super Bowls, has a big contract, but he lived not on the contract, which was not guaranteed. He lived on his endorsements and his other areas. This, to many of the young generation right now, is what we all know as a side hustle, what they call a side hustle. Now, I'm not saying we need to go and get into that, but we need to focus on the income we do have coming in and focus on that. What's going out now? Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show today, if this is speaking to you a little bit, because I've gotten a lot of responses on these when I'm at dinner events or on my radio show, and I want to pause here on the Make Your Money Matter show today, because if it's speaking to you to dial in your finances and your savings and investing like Gronk did, let's just say it's the spirit of the football season, give us a call. We want to align your investments and retirement goals and objectives with your plan. Now, I may be speaking to someone right now who's saying, well, Brad, I am in my tomorrow self. I am retired. I'm going to go be retiring in the next 2 years. I'm no longer 25 or 30, or maybe you are 20 or 30 listening or watching right now. This matters to you just the same because the longevity and the sustainability of your retirement across the spectrum of age matters. I mean, essentially, if you're in the accumulation phase of your life right now, the working and saving years, that's the time to start dialing in. If you're in the distribution phase of your life, ultimately the income phase that I've shared on the show and retirement, it matters just the same. And there's always two things about retirement that I think are important. And this is retirement at any age, of income and liquidity. What are the sources of income you have coming in? Maybe if you're in your 60s or 70s, it might be pension or Social Security, or maybe some other fixed income like rental income. Maybe if you're younger, maybe it's rental income right now or other dividends you have on your portfolio. But understanding your income relative to what you have saved and is liquid matters. But on top of all that, especially nowadays with inflation running rampant, fixed income in particular can be somewhat of a problem. So, if your cost of living adjustments within those don't increase relative to what inflation is, if we get an increase as an example on COLA, on a fixed income of, let's say 3%, but everything around you, everything around us right now is going up 5 or 6%, we're losing money. So focusing on the strategy of budgeting and saving and ultimately the distribution of your investments at some point, whether it's from your 401k or maybe a brokerage account, matters for the longevity and the sustainability. And it's vital for you to be able to say, hey, I'm investing, but I'm investing for a purpose and for a reason. And I want to end this little conversation here about Gronk for a second here and why we should apply Gronk's advices to our finances. Because as I shared, although Gronk's contract was worth $54 million, he knew it wasn't guaranteed. And for any of us right now who are working or coming off a career maybe, or we know that our jobs aren't necessarily guaranteed. By the way, this is true if you own your own business, small or large, or if you work for a small or large corporations. Nothing is guaranteed in life. And for Rob Gronkowski, this changed his values and shifted his focus to what was important, his future financial prosperity. This is why I'm highlighting this guy. I mean, I know we see him again on social media or maybe on commercials, and he's obviously a very loving and jovial guy, huge guy from the University of Arizona. And what's interesting about this to me is that at a young age, this guy was dialed. I mean, he wanted to make sure that his tomorrow self was taken care of while also living for today. I think of all my clients in the 20 years I've been doing this, and anyone out there watching or listening right now, myself included, and my wife Veronica, we talk about this constantly. How do we live for today while also preparing for tomorrow? Now I'm going to share you a little secret here that I talk about this every week. So I guess it's not really that much of a secret. If you're watching the Make Your Money Matter show or you're listening here, planning wins out. Yep, I know, boring, I get it. But that's how you take care of tomorrow as well as live for today. That's how you're able to do that. Planning out where you're putting your assets, where you're putting your savings, and what you are focusing on when it comes to your investing today, or thinking from a debt management standpoint, from an outflow or liabilities, whether it's putting kids through school or paying down credit cards you might have accumulated or education costs out of college. All of these things are factored into a plan, a wealth forecast. If you don't have that, it's very hard for you to see tomorrow's future. But we make it very simple here. That's our goal as advisors. And the $4.5 billion that we manage for clients across this great nation of ours, we can do that for you just the same. I mean, your savings and ultimately your assets for distribution, again, these are all things that are important when it comes to being financially free, having income and having liquidity. And although we don't want to admit it, income in general is not predictable. I mean, the year 2020 made that abundantly clear. So your value systems helps you separate them. What's important from what I'll call the expensive thrills, right? You want to start by recording where your money goes. I know it sounds basic and I know it sounds rudimentary, but it works. It will also keep you from retiring broke, like the record I mentioned earlier, and the spending, and reveals the loopholes in, I think, your value systems, like, spending $500 on shoes or $10,000 on a big splurge or something with zero returns. Now, those might be dramatic numbers, but you get my point. And this, my friends, is a biblical principle if you look at it. In Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Let's be honest with ourselves. And not only provide ourselves with the biblical notion of how we are to look at our monies, but also taking care of ourselves tomorrow, because that's essentially what Rob Gronkowski was doing, if you really break it down. Okay, so some quick steps here to calculate how much you should be saving for your retirement, because I know we're gonna get some questions on this. Since we're talking about taking care of your tomorrow self, we should first calculate your expenses and project them into retirement or into that age that you wanna be financially free with things like inflation. By the way, for our clients who've called in from the show or from the radio program, when we do our wealth forecast, what we call our black book, we basically take those numbers that you already have. So this is not like you have to recreate the wheel here. This is not some big data-driven thing that's gonna take you hours to gather. I think a lot of people are hold off on doing a plan because they're like, oh, I gotta put all this stuff together. Our job is to take what I think you know already, we'll call them two-dimensional numbers, and we make them three-dimensional. We make them dynamic. We do that by adding things like inflation to them. We do that by adding conservative rates of returns and seeing what the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years look like. And then we provide what we call a Monte Carlo scenario. Basically, it stress tests about 1,000 different variations of the market over the history and where your plan falls. Wouldn't you want to see that? I mean, it's really important to know if you could project predictably, not guaranteed, but predictably, where your money will go in 5, 10, or 15 years. And you can be aggressive with that stress testing. I'll call it saying you have, let's say, ancillary $10,000 every year of stuff that you just don't know about, whether it's a trip or something needs to be fixed. We can plug that in there. We can put all of that in there so you can see where all this goes. Because the last thing we want is paralysis by analysis. We don't want that. We want to be able to see the plan and build towards it. And we need to start first by calculating your expenses and projecting them into retirement. Now, again, one of this is inflation, as I mentioned. We use this and we do this by using reasonable distribution rates to live off of when you want to be retired or financially free. Let's say we use a 5% distribution rate. A very sustainable national historic average is 5%. And a 5% distribution rate is basically a withdrawal on an annual basis from whatever you've saved. And you can figure out how much you need to save up to support yourself on that number. Wouldn't you want to know that? Because this is one of the things I've noticed in 20 years of being a fiduciary advisor for my clients that we just don't realize. We can actually attach some very predictable numbers and realize daily that, okay, I'm spending or saving, that $100 a month into my 401k. What's it going to look like in 20 years or 10 years or 30 years? You can run those numbers with a very predictable and sustainable situation because you can use conservative rates. We will help you do that. A good advisor will help you do that. I mean, think about this. Wouldn't you want to know if you're investing right now where that's going to go? Doing a stress test 1,000 different ways to see if all the market cycles where this might end up. Pretty cool, right? And it can go to what I look like from a worst case scenario to the mid-range to the best scenario. It's an amazing tool for you to be able to predictably understand the amount you need to save. I will also add this. I've noticed this in 20 years. It's also a psychology of money. And what I mean by that is money is very psychological to all of us. I talk about it heavily for those of you who watch the show each week. And because as I always say, when it comes to money, we have two brains. We have our brain in our head, the logical, the rational brain, and we have the brain in our stomach, as my kids call them, their tum-tums. And that's the emotions. And sometimes I'll say, oftentimes, I guess, our emotional brain wins out. We react. Sometimes the things that we don't do when it comes to our money matters more than the things that we do. And I think that's a really important concept as you understand the rationale and a plan, because it keeps you on track. I want to reiterate that. Some of the things that we don't do matter more than the things that we do when it comes to our money. Now imagine for a second you're going on a road trip. For example, let's say you're heading from California to Arizona. I'm just going to put that out there. You know where you're going. You put it in your phone. That's the destination. Now you may veer off to do a gas station stop. Maybe you have to go to the bathroom, something like that, especially if you're traveling with kids. Real quick aside, just did a trip with my kids. It was about a 3-hour drive. We stopped about 3 or 4 times for everything under the sun. It went from 3 hours to 4.5 like that. Anyone with kids or grandparents, you know what I'm talking about. So there are things that will derail you. But in my example of my kids, we ended up at the destination. It's a great example of a plan. You will have the plan in place and the destination you have in mind. But here's the thing. Most people don't have the destination in mind. They don't know the number they're trying to get. So it's like you're sitting out there and you're basically putting this money out there, and all the anxieties and fears you have about the market is because you don't know where you're headed. And our job as advisors is to help you understand and bring you back to the freeway, bring you back to the route. You might veer off, that's okay, but our job is to bring you back. And the idea is making sure that those stops, those stop-offs, don't hurt you. That's the analogy that I've been talking about heavily over the past couple of years. And it's really just like this year, for example, in the last 8-9 months, we've seen in the market, because volatility will make us get off the freeway. It will make us think we need to get off. It will make us think we have to move off of our path that we hadn't planned on taking. So if you understand and think about this logically for a second, if you know you have a destination in mind, and we can help you provide you with that, you might take some deviations, it might take some offshoots here, but you'll know as you talk to an advisor that your goal is to get there. Your goal is to build the destination, because many times when you do a financial plan or someone starts out investing, they talk about what to invest in, how much they should invest. But my focus is, where are you going? What's the destination? What are your goals and objectives with your money? Making sure your destination is sound, that's a well forecasted plan. That's what a proper financial plan will do. And again, it's not something you have to build and spend a whole bunch of hours on. For some data, we can do this with the numbers you already have. You have your own numbers, you know them. You know what you're paying for rent or mortgage or everything else. And as just mentioned, once you understand your distribution rate, that 4 to 5%, we then can discount that back using, again, a reasonable conservative rate of return, let's say 5%, by using the same simple method. You now have a better idea of how much you need to have saved up to then live off of your money for the rest of your life. And this highlights, back to the original conversation, the whole thing of understanding what you have going out when you have a goal in mind and the objective in mind. All that kind of stuff becomes almost smaller, those budgetary items. You're like, I don't want to spend that $30 on those pair of shoes. I want that to go to my 401k or my brokerage, because that's going to help me get to my destination, because I now know my destination. And I want to talk about the other side real quickly of preparing for retirement and saving more than you spend. Some people are frugal by nature. I've met them. I know them. Or maybe they've grown up on hand-me-downs like Rob Gronkowski did. He had 5 brothers, by the way, and learned the simple way of life early on. Others are not so good at it. This is me. I'm a spender. I've had to curtail myself using my plan and my advisor here to build a plan, and I'm honest about that. So I relate to a lot of people, and we need to shift our mindsets through making simple swaps in our daily lives for financially savvy choices. And you can save more money over time without sacrificing the things that are most important to you. And that, my friends, is what matters. Shifting your mindset to prioritize savings over excessive spending starts and stops with you. Okay, it's time to answer your questions. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to address, you can leave a comment or question in the comment section. Or again, if it's something you want to talk about more one-on-one, you can just go to our About page on this channel, send us an email. We'll always keep the questions I read here anonymous, so you never have to worry about your name being shared, but we'd love to hear from you. So the question that came this week had a lot to do with planning, which is why I think it's a good question to talk about. Because even though I was talking about Rob Gronkowski today in the NFL, with the NFL season's kicking off, I love the story about how he basically lived within his means and lived on money that was ancillary or more of a side hustle than his actual salary from the NFL. But the question that came in is, how does planning actually help with investing? To be honest, when I first read that, I was like, well, that's a pretty just straightforward question, but it actually had a lot of depth to it. And I was talking a lot about that today on the show around planning. And I want to maybe elaborate. It might help answer this question. Planning does so much when it comes to anything in our life. I mean, put it this way. When you set out a plan, you typically start with the end in mind first, right? Take a trip, for example. If you want to go to the Bahamas, as an example, you will find the hotel, find the destination, and then work backwards. You'll then find flights. You'll then find the travel, car to get to the airport. You'll find all that on the backward side. We don't do that with our money. We basically start out with, what do I have available to spend, right? What do I have available to invest? And that's how I start my plan. And I think it's really important for anyone of any age right now looking to invest or build that financial plan for themselves. You want to help and sit down and focus on the end game first. Maybe you're 30 years old and you have the traditional mindset of retiring at 65. Great. Nothing wrong with that at all. We have 35 years. We need to put some assumptions there of inflation, historical conservative rates of return, and figure out, okay, how much do you want to live off of? Well, Brad, I need about $5,000 a month in tomorrow's dollars, basically 35 years from now, dollars, today, to live on. All right, so we basically say, okay, how much is it going to take us to get to a number that we can pull 5% from to equal $60,000 a year or $5,000 a month? We can start with the end in mind. So last thing you want to do in your financial life is to not set up the end goal to arrive there and be like, well, do I have enough money? I don't know. And so when I share this, whether you're 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever age you're listening or watching right now, it really doesn't matter in terms of when you started. It talks about, and what I really want to focus on is starting. Like, do it now. And don't just invest because someone's telling you to invest or it's the wise thing to do to keep pace with inflation or grow your wealth. Those are all true, but really focusing on how you're helping yourself tomorrow, today. And you can do that by really sitting with an advisor. An advisor helps you do that. I mean, it's really hard. That's why we get credentialed in this. That's why we're experiencing this. A good fiduciary advisor will sit on your side of the table or kneecap to kneecap and look you in the whites of your eyes and be like, this is how we're going to do this to exactly attain the goals and objectives you have. So again, I hope that answered the question for this week. If you have a question or comment you'd like me to read here, you can leave it in the comment section, or again, email us in the About page on our channel. Now, before we go, if you found anything helpful today and want to learn more, you can visit our website at onecapital.com. You can also scan the QR code on the screen with your smartphone and it'll get you right there. You can also text us. Look, we want to help. There's no pressure here. We don't treat people like a number. In fact, we value the relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So click, call, or text us today. If you're not following us on social media, you should be. You can follow us at Make Your Money Matter. We're sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you enjoy the show, share it with someone you like. And I guess if you don't like the show, share it with someone you don't like. But until next week, make your money matter.